Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. The Kinect is mainly remembered as a family-friendly peripheral with games that allow you to play mini-games, pet digital animals, or visit various movie properties. Yet there was a period where Microsoft wanted to bring in games for a hardcore gaming crowd. One of these games was Rise of Nightmares, the first M-rated Kinect game that promised to be a gory horror game where you get to use weapons with your own hands. So let's continue with the Kinect Misadventures series, where I go through the Kinect catalog one game at a time and see how each one holds up. Today I'm going to go through Rise of Nightmares history, tell you how I felt about it, and give you its lasting impact. All footage was captured off of an Xbox 360, and I want to thank my YouTube channel members for their support. But let's go ahead and hop into this game's history.
Don't worry, we still have your future. Nu. E mai grav decât am crezut. He comes for you. It may be already too late.
The development of Rise of Nightmares started sometime in 2009 or early 2010, with the producer Satoshi Ito saying it took around a year and a half to develop. Ito, who had previously worked on games like House of the Dead, saw the Kinect and thought there was potential for horror games since you were vulnerable in front of the camera. He would work with Sega to develop a concept for a horror game for Kinect, and it would end up being its first mature rated title. The game was first unveiled at the Tokyo Game Show 2010, where Microsoft unveiled mini-games for the Kinect, which was launching the following month. Rise of Nightmares felt like an appeal to hardcore gamers, which you can find noted in many articles at the time. Also, many thought it was the House of the Dead team that would be making this game, and honestly, I thought that as well, but only Ito had ever worked on a game in the series. The launch trailer sells the horror aspects of the game, and it's filled with screams and horror. Yet, as we progressed closer to its launch, it got sillier ads, such as the censored grandma ad, which I remembered, featuring a zombie spokesperson and a cursing grandma.
Hey, come on, Nana. You know you can't resist.
I certainly can resist for brains. Do I look like I'm in the mood to dance around? Or sing some Carrie Okie? You little wipes don't get it, do you? There's mother zombies that need killing. And all you can do is dance around. This technology is military grade.
Don't let this happen to your family. Hello, I'm the official spokesman for Rise of Nightmares.
When these ads were released, there was some excitement for this one since it was a horror game for Kinect, which was a novel concept. The game was shown at E3 2011 and was set to release in September. Some early previews were not positive on the controls, and they noted the insanity of the horror plot, but still sounded interested to see where the game went. And on September 6, 2011, Rise of Nightmares was released exclusively on the Xbox 360 for Kinect. It would also get releases in Europe, Australia, and Japan later on that month. I have never touched this game before until recently, yet I always found it intriguing. As a spoiler for the lasting impact section, this game wasn't reviewed very well, and it seemed like to me to be a silly horror game that might be a bit of an oddity on the Kinect, and I love weird and strange experiences. So I was excited for this one, and let me tell you how I felt about it, starting with the plot.
Hey! I don't want to die like this! Somebody! Anybody!
Help us! Someone help us!
Rise of Nightmares takes place in Romania. You play as Josh, who's riding a train with his wife. The opening cutscene is funny to me because I'm standing there from the perspective of Josh, as I glug down alcohol and my wife threatens my marriage. Honestly, I find it kinda silly to be introduced to the characters this way, but it does set up some stakes later. And you meet the other passengers on the train, and when the train wrecks, all of you bound together for safety at an old mansion. Come to find out, this mansion is ridden with zombie monstrosities and your wife has been kidnapped. Your goal is to find your wife and get out of there. But don't worry, You get to stop the evil force that is desecrating the people in this mansion. It's a plot that does nothing new and borrows many tropes from other horror media. Early on, you figure out that your wife has been kidnapped because she resembles the dead wife of the mansion owner, which is a cliche twist that has been done over and over. These elements are a bit bland, but they spark creativity once the plot details get a little sillier. There are elements like dancing evil ballerinas that you have to dodge out of the way of, which is bizarre. And there's a man with a dog body that pops up that you need to get his original body back for. When these pop up, it plays into the campy horror element, and I think it does those elements best. It's tongue-in-cheek, especially with the split personality villain, and I wish it had done more of this. But for most of it, you kinda just get a tired plot that you've seen before. I don't think it's miserable, but it's only okay. It's not doing anything great either. It doesn't help that Josh is a dull catalyst for the audience and has no actual personality traits. At a point, I thought maybe I was taking this game too seriously. There are plenty of silly things happening here, and I love those. But I'd say a good amount of the plot is a basic bullet point outline. It wants to take you through various gross out moments, like reaching in the dead bodies, which is fun, but the glue holding it all together just isn't interesting. It needed more silly things to play up the camp, because it feels like it's taking itself too seriously for a game with a guy with a dog's body. It ends up feeling like a mixed bag of a story. It's sparingly inspired, but the plot is kept to a minimum to help facilitate the gameplay ideas. The gameplay is where Rise of Nightmares wants to focus on and try new things, and it does some cool stuff. Most of the time, Kinect games make you feel locked in, which is funny because you move around in your own space, but generally they aren't an exploratory experience. Here you take on a first-person view and move around the environments. You put one foot out in front of you to move forward, and you shift your shoulders from left to right to turn. It takes some getting used to. It feels kind of like tank controls, but it was surprisingly well done. I got the movement down pretty well, and it's hard to explain, but moving in a first-person game with Kinect like this felt intuitive. It's probably the most intuitive movement in a game like this I've played. I was scared it would have trouble reading my motions, but it generally worked well. It helps that many environments are hallways and small rooms, so you know where to go usually, so there's not a lot of chances of missteps. The only time I'd say where it doesn't work the best is in the more precise moments. Every so often you'll have to dodge spikes or blades, and you'll notice that sometimes it's not precise enough to stop on a dime, which can get annoying. Yet there's not a lot of these moments, and the tenseness of these moments makes it entertaining. You'll notice though that this game resembles an on-rails shooter at times, which made me think of it as a House of the Dead game with a new IP slapped onto it. But that doesn't seem to be the case. You can even raise your hand and let the game walk for you, and here you can see how linear it is. I don't mind linear games if they're done correctly, yet here it can get a little tedious with the amount of enemies that swarm you. In this game you fight with only fists and melee weapons. You bring up your hands in a boxing stance and you swing at enemies. You also cross your arms to block so you don't get hit by enemies. The fighting is cool, but extremely easy. A few jabs usually just knock something out, and the game auto-blocks a lot for you. There are many moments where I wasn't blocking, and I guess the Kinect read the movement and blocked for me. To combat it being easy, they made it so there's a ton of enemies, and you just jab at them repeatedly. It's cool at first, and when you get a neat weapon like the chainsaw, it's a blast, but fighting easy enemy after easy enemy does get a bit tedious towards the end. It doesn't help that the punching movements don't read well all the time. Many enemies have shielded parts of their bodies, like their arms. Let's say their right arm is metal, you want to swing at them from the opposite side. The game is not precise enough to allow for movements like that. It can read a swing, but where it will land and which direction can be a bit of a mystery. I struggled with side swings and instead just went for straight-on jabs, which mostly read correctly. I won't say it isn't fun though, and there's specific enemies that pop up like the goo spitters that I think have a fun element. In extended play sessions though, you'll tend to notice how many swarms of similar enemies pad the game. Yet the weapon variety keeps it engaging to see what some of the items do. Yet these are not the only motion-sensitive segments of the game, which this game tries hard to throw every movement type into it, which I immensely enjoyed. You will duck under kicks, sidestep blades, and other miscellaneous tasks, filling this game with a lot of different motions. I love the moments when you're in the water and you gotta move your hands like you're swimming, or when you need to sift your hand through a dead body. There's one where you swat your hands to remove bugs, and I loved all these small touches. It makes it feel like a mini-game collection in a way, or at least a Kinect game that wasn't interested in doing the bare minimum. It could have just been a basic shooter, but instead it decided to take everything it could out of the horror concept and ask you to move with it. Everything has a motion-sensitive input, like turning a wheel or opening doors, and I think that's the fun part about Kinect. Throw every motion at the door and have fun with it. I think for some of these you could just swing your arms wildly and it would work, but it's fun to just try and do what it wants. Even when you're asked to do something like cradle a baby. And once again, it's times like this where it's embracing its oddness is where it truly shines. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed Rise of Nightmare's gameplay design. It has an ingenuity that helps make some of its weaker elements stand out as better overall. The movement is intuitive and it felt fun to walk around, even if it's a bit slow. The combat isn't the best because it's a bit easy, but when it works well, it's fun and it's easy to have a good time with. I liked all the contextual motion moments that make it feel like Sega wanted to do everything in their power to try something different on Kinect. When it's fresh, it works best, and the Rise of Nightmares gameplay ends up being entertaining. Maybe it's just a novelty because I don't think I'll ever replay this game, but my first playthrough took me around 6 hours and the gameplay entertained me.
It's that thing again. Shh, stay quiet. Don't move. Don't move. Don't even make a sound. It should pass us right by.
Visually, Rise of Nightmares is quite grim and has a dark art style and looks gothic since you're stuck in a castle for most of its gameplay. The art design isn't the best here, honestly. Much like its story, the look of the levels is quite basic. It's a lot of brick walls and winding narrow hallways. Not that it looks bad, but there's never a time where I was wowed or impressed by the landscapes on display. It's a little muddy and dark, but not scary or silly. I would have hoped for more disgusting areas or maybe something a little goofier, but it ended up feeling a bit empty and bland. The enemy designs are fun though. They are grotesque creatures that are mangled and put together with machinery. Some of them have fun designs and help give this game some variety to the game world, especially with the bosses that have a great presence. There's a really neat boss that's in gold shining armor and he walks down hallways, and you have to stand quietly and you can't move. So you have to stand completely still in front of your Kinect as this giant man walks around you. It's a really neat part of the game. It's also a disgusting game as far as gore goes. It's riffing on movies like Saw, surprisingly, with people placed in traps and hacking body parts off of people. It feels visceral, and I think for any horror fan, this will be fun to see. They got the blood effects down right, and it makes for a gross-out horror game. Overall though, I'd say the game just looks fine. It's not spectacular, but it's not bad. Some of the characters don't look great, but the environments don't look bad, they just don't have great art design. That's the thing, the issue is more with it just being bland. The visuals end up feeling middle of the road overall. Regarding sound effects work, Rise of Nightmare has gory sounds that are pretty good. It's guttural and crunchy, and when you use things like the chainsaw, it all sounds good when you're tearing into enemies. There are some good sound cues too for when you hit motion sections and you have to jump away quickly. These work well to ensure that you are ready for what's coming at you next. The sound effects combine to create a solid world with its voice acting. The voice acting, though, for the most part, is pretty bad, and it's not on the level of Sega's House of the Dead with its silly performances. This game ends up only being funny sometimes. It's the villains that shine through with their vocal performances. Those get a little goofy and fun, but Josh, on the other hand, is giving a lacking performance, and it's the same with his wife. And it's a word I'll use again and again for this game, but it just feels bland. I don't think it's the actor's fault, though, and it's more the fault of the writing in this game. The music is a major part of this game according to interviews that I read, but that honestly leaves me scratching my head. There's a lot of praise getting pushed at Ron Fish for coming into this project, who has made great work, especially in the Arkham series, but his music is pushed to the background and it's hardly noticeable here. From what I heard, it's just typical creepy music with some slow pianos. It's not bad, but nothing notable either. There are hardly any moments where the soundtrack shines through the game, and it just sits around in the background and really doesn't add that much to the experience. I can't say that the soundtrack was an element of this game that really stuck with me. Rise of Nightmares is a game with plenty of issues, but it's an interesting game. The visuals and plot are lacking. Not that they're bad, but they lack a spice that makes any game interesting. It feels like many elements were copied and pasted from other horror media and put into this game. It covers a lot of familiar territory. Yet when it comes to gameplay, I think it does a lot of interesting things to make it entertaining. The motion controls on movements are surprisingly well done. The combat has issues, but it is a good time, and all the motions it asks you to do give this game a lot of variety, and it makes it feel like Sega put a lot of thought into the experience. It gets a little repetitive with combat, which knocks it down a little, but for a Kinect game, you want something fun to control, and I think this one scores. As of now, this is the most unique experience I've played on the Kinect. It's ambitious, which I always enjoy good ambition. I just wish that such a mixed bag wasn't behind it, and it really stuck to being campy. When it's allowed to be silly, it's entertaining, but a lot of the times it just comes off as bland. I wish the other elements were as good as the gameplay, because that would have made it much more memorable. As a Kinect game, it's fun, but a little too bland and repetitive to say it's anything great. I think I need a little more time to focus on working on the plot to make this all around a fun game. And on my ranking list of Kinect games, Rise of Nightmares is going to enter in at the last spot out of the 3 games I've covered on this channel. Both Kinect Adventures and Dance Central are more entertaining and tighter controlling games with visual identities that stand out. I will say Nightmares is at last here, but it's only 3 games. There's definitely far worse, because Nightmares at least has some ingenuity behind it. Rise of Nightmares released to mixed reception upon its release and holds a 54 on Metacritic. GameSpot gave it a 5.5, calling it unremarkable and too easy. IGN gave it a 4, calling it a novelty and it controlled way too simply. Official Xbox Magazine would give it a 6 out of 10, saying that the movement was the best they'd seen on Kinect, but even then it was still shoddy. I was surprised by all of the middle-of-the-road reviews here, because I remember this one getting torn apart more than I thought. I remember hearing a lot of bad things, but looking back now, it looks like it was more of a mixed reception, and nowadays I really don't think it gets brought up very much, except for when people talk about horror novelty games. But users on Metacritic praised this one, and some found it really fun. On Backlogged, it holds a 2.6 out of 5 with 66 plays. In the reviews, you'll see a mix of some who thought it was rough, and then there's some people who liked its weirdness. I think the analysis over time has become that this is a weird game that will not appeal to everyone because it has a lot of issues, but some are just intrigued by its novelty and weirdness that it's hard to step away from. There have never been talks about a sequel or return to the series, and the only time it's come up in the news from my knowledge is when Snoop Dogg released a single using the cover art of this game. It's an odd little footnote in the history of this game, and honestly, this game will most likely be stuck on Kinect as a little oddity in gaming history. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like as it helps out the video and the channel. Be sure to comment below with any memories you have with this game if you loved it, hated it, or maybe if you're just interested in it. Subscribe to keep up with the retro Xbox content, and I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.